workshop, The Next Era in Energy Leaders. We're going to be talking a lot about millennials who are currently working in the energy industry like us and who might be looking to come into the energy industry, and a little bit about the Gen Z folks who will be coming up. So yeah, we're going to be talking a bit about age, but don't worry, it's a safe space, and you can feel free to make fun of your own generation or others. Like, for example, everyone follow along on your AirPods. Got it. Thank you for the pity laughs. My name is Dylan Lockwood. I am the content editor at Z Prime. I've been working at Z Prime for about 3 years now, and it's been great. I never thought I would be working in energy, but here I am having a great time doing it. We're gonna be doing a bit of Q&A, doing a couple of games. But first, I thought I'd let our panelists introduce themselves. So, Erin, we'll start with you.
Hey, I'm Erin Otian. I am the Director of Research Programs at Z Prime. Also been there about 3 years.
I'm Gerardo Delgado. I'm an energy attorney. I also serve as a legal policy advisor for Commissioner Oliva at the Illinois Commerce Commission.
I'm Erin Hardick. I'm the lead research analyst at Z Prime. I help create most of our content that we put out, write research papers, create the infographics, and then participate in webinars and also the events as kind of a subject matter expert. I've been in energy for about 3 years now.
And I'm Cameron Freeberg. I'm a utility strategist for emerging technology at Austin Energy, so I had to make the daunting half-mile commute to get over here.
Now, before we get into the sort of Q&As and discussions, we thought we'd do a little activity. As you can see, we've got a timeline up on the board here, and you guys all have sticky notes on the table. What I'm going to want you all to do is take 2 sticky notes of each color, and you're going to be writing 2 years on those. For each generation, for each of these 4 generations, we've color-coded sticky notes. What we're going to want you to do is, on 1 sticky note per color, write when you think this generation starts and when you think this generation ends. Because there's a lot of back and forth and controversy on these nebulous dates that actually happen. Don't worry about getting anything right. There's not really a right answer. We're just kind of feeling out how you guys feel about it. So, for example, if I think the baby boomer generation starts in 1950, I'm wrong, but I'll put it up here. And then I think it ends in, say, 81, and I'll put it right here. And we've got baby boomers are the green, Gen X are the salmon, millennials are the blue, and Gen Z are the kind of hot pink ones. So we'll take about 5 minutes to do that, or whenever you guys all finish, and feel free to bring them up. I'm also going to hand these to you guys as well.
Okay.
2 of each.
2 of each color?
Yes. And you guys might need pens.
Yeah, we start with you.
We call for president.
Like I said, no right
idea.
No right or wrong.
That's a good idea.
Millennial Jane.
Oh, I feel the pressure with these ones. I feel like I'm getting more. I have no idea. Oh.
Yeah, you don't have to
Do
say like a specific date.
Pick a beginning and then
When they start?
Yep, when they start and when they end.
Oh, and when they end.
Yeah, so you'll have 2.
So there should be 2. Yeah, there should be 2 of each posted. And yeah, and as far as like where you put them on the timeline, we've broken up into sections of 5. There's no exact science.
When they end, shouldn't really matter.
Yeah.
Instead of salmon, so yeah. Sorry, the strips didn't exactly match the squares.
So, those are got it. Yeah, what's orange?
Orange is going to be Gen X. You guys didn't get salmon ones.
We gotta be at equal.
And then pink is Z.
Millennials are the
Yes.
pink is Z.
I think that's.
Yes. Oh, hi, Sheree. Nice to meet you in person.
Miss Billy.
Yeah, this was not easy.
I didn't realize the traffic jam in this table setup was
I'm
pretty-
telling you, today's a good day to get away from there.
This is interactive.
Are you speaking? Me, no. My boss is, so. President of Kansas, like three. Huh? She's speaking like three. Yeah, something like that.
Just realized. Wow, the system is. That. We haven't indicated exactly which ones are starting. This also happens. There's three of us.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's a trick.
Knew it, yes, generation
When I looked at that, I was like,
We invented a generation.
there's some people in.
Do you remember people referring to millennials as Generation Y?
Yeah.
Why bother? You know, that was a joke though, for a while. Sorry.
Generation Y is a dead term. It was as far as I can tell, it was the term used for millennials before the term millennial came out, and everyone liked millennials better. So
Yeah, because you can't make that joke.
yeah, you can't make that joke anymore. I was just saying there's a lot of overlap in this middle here because there are people who like start millennials in the 90s and some in the 2000s. Or started in the 2000s, I'm sure.
Yeah. I used the wrong color.
Those two things.
Your pink is wrong, right?
Yeah.
I was like, wait a second. I'm like, that's really early.
Have you any millennials born in 1965?
Oh, wait, whatever. This
I
is
have
subjective.
no-
It's not.
Yeah.
This isn't a subjective exercise. I'm not gonna correct
I
you.
used up a lot this weekend.
Yeah.
I knew I was doing it.
Oh, okay.
That's a little explain.
I'm expecting I'll have to pay extra too.
Right, is it-
If
If there's anyone still working, we're calling time here. But I think everyone's got their stuff.
I used to have it.
You can already sort of see a picture starting
Once you get to a
to.
certain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's already,
Hey, man. Thanks very much.
So we've got some areas of consensus and some areas of things being different. It looks like the earliest we've got here is we've got some 30s, 1938 for baby boomers, and ending in like 55 is probably the earliest, or maybe that's a start, but I think that's an end. And then we've got it as high as 1980 here. So just for the record, there's no right answer, but like general consensus from articles we pulled is that we have like this is the greatest generation, the greatest generation is basically everything up until 1946, and then from 46 to 64, you've got the baby boomers from Generation X. Generation X is around 65 to 84. Millennials are about 82 to 2004, and then Gen Z is everything after. It's 2004 and up. Now, those aren't hard and fast rules, but that's what we found. I just want to kind of ask both the panelists and everyone out there what you're getting, what sort of picture you're getting from this spread here. Why did you guys make decisions that maybe fell outside of that? How do you define a generation?
Can you say where Gen X is? According to some of the stuff we pulled?
According to some of the stuff we pulled, well, we've got it starting as early as 61 and ending as late as 2010, unless someone mixed up the color. Which is entirely possible.
Yeah.
Because I understand the salmon and the pink are fairly similar in color.
It's interesting because you can tell that the millennial post-its are kind of scattered from 1980 all the way over to 2015. And we saw that from some of the research we pulled that most people say that millennials end right before that 2005, which is where most of the people in the room, we kind of came to that general consensus, and then Gen Z really is that generation that comes after. But this really does highlight that there is kind of still this misunderstanding of what is millennial, and how early were they born, and then how late. So I think that our workshop is telling us kind of what our hypothesis was, which is what exactly is millennial, and there is different viewpoints on that.
Especially at the concentration of millennials, like you said, at the end, currently, which is a whole different thing. As a perspective of millennial, the new generation perhaps Z, it's a different kind of ideology.
Yeah.
So that's super interesting. But to answer your question, I think, at least when I was trying to determine the different generations, I associated events. So I just think back and say, certain events, it means that would be defined or define a generation. So I don't know if others thought that as well.
I liked one question that Aaron said at the central. You guys, what is a millennial? Does anyone out there, any brave volunteer, want to answer that question? What is a millennial? Not just in terms of date, but what are defining traits of a millennial?
They want more of a work-life balance.
Work-life balance.
So unlike the boomers kind of were loyal and look for long-term careers at companies, where millennials and Gen X are ones that, hey, I'm not looking to stay long-term anywhere. I'm going to move across and up. I'm going to go wherever I can to get as far as I can.
I always look at millennials as knowing a life without the internet and knowing life with the internet.
And I agree with that. Oh, go ahead, Shree.
I'm sorry, I was going to add to your point. There was a book that was written, I forget the name of it, but the author had talked about digital immigrants versus digital natives. So if you were born before the internet, you were a digital immigrant. If you were born after the internet, you were a digital native. And they contrasted the attitudes, learning styles between these two groups, because it gets pretty fuzzy as to those four labels. But the before, pre-internet, post-internet is kind of a clear delineation as to how it affected them.
I would say that is, at least in classifying myself as a millennial, that transition is is kind of the differentiator between the next generations. We were familiar with the internet, but we weren't completely engulfed in it in the way that kids these days. The younger generation Gen Z, I think, is someone who within 6 months, a year, they're interacting with an iPad these days. You have kids who who are on social media when they're 12, 11 years old. That didn't happen to me until college, high school, college. So that would be the biggest differentiator, at least from my standpoint.
I think social media, I think, is the big one, because millennials, if you were born on the late end of being a millennial, you probably grew up with a computer with internet access in your house. But Gen Zers grew up in social media. Like they had a Facebook, or not really Facebook. They had a Snapchat account by the time they were 8 years old.
Yeah, I find it really interesting because I haven't got a clue what a millennial looks like, to be honest. I mean, you know what I mean? I don't see them coming. I don't categorize them like that. What I've seen, I mean, I've been in the energy industry for more years, like I mentioned, but it's the way the organisation culture changes around these different people coming in. And it's quite dramatic how just those aspects like social media or just being way more literate and people in meetings with watchers on that they're reading their emails now and stuff like that. It changes the organisation culture, and I guess that's how I gauge it. Is when I'm in organisations now, I look around, and it's not that I'm looking at millennials or Gen X. I'm looking at the culture that's being driven by the people, and then you can start. Okay, and now I can see this.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think that's a good point, because actually Z Prime was started by 3 people who are, I guess they're on that end spectrum of millennials, but we're a completely digital company. We have an office that we use in downtown Austin, but we're only there maybe once a week. A lot of times we're not there at the same time. So we're always collaborating online, on the phone. We do use the phone a lot, which maybe younger generations don't do as much, but yeah, we're a digital virtual company.
Yeah. And I think that transitions into the main focus, which is millennials in energy specifically, the ones already there, like us, and the ones that are going to be coming in. Just quick show of hands, who here identifies as a millennial? And we'd like to hear from all of you. I'm going to just start going down the line here, talking about just a little bit about our journeys, how we got into this space. Erin, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Dylan. So I have been at Z Prime for about 3 years. Before that, I was working for the state of Texas at the land office, which was tangentially related to energy. I was in the energy resources division there. So it was a lot more like oil and gas and more about the actual land rights and usage. But I met Jason, the founder of our company, and eventually moved over to Z Prime. So that's pretty much how I just ended up in energy.
As for me, I went to law school, and right out of law school went to work for a civil litigation firm. That was in Boston, so I returned back to Chicago where I grew up, and I wasn't really passionate about the work I was doing. It just wasn't purposeful for me. And although, just to kind of echo the transition I think that millennials have, there's a reference that one of the panelists who wasn't able to be here today, she made a reference that she's a millennial with boomer tendencies. And that strong work ethic, that you just do it because that's what you're expected to do. But I had that battle in me with the work that I was doing that just wasn't satisfying. So in that decision, I decided I was going to make a move, but it had to be very deliberate. And I told myself it had to be in an area that was impactful and innovative. Innovative because it would bring constant advancement, it'd be part of change, right? So many disciplines that I would be trained in throughout the course of my career. And impactful because I wanted to make a difference in people's lives, and that's really what essentially it lacked in the work that I was doing. So someone came across my resume from the state, and I was in the private sector, and I'm like, okay, well, he sent me an ad to work for the commission, and this Illinois Commerce Commission. I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. I read the ad. I'm like, okay, well, it's dealing with utilities, so it touches people's lives. I'm working with a public official, so again, I have an opportunity to make impact. And I can utilize my skill set, obviously, as a lawyer, which was required. So I met with the commissioner. We completely hit it off. She's also is a lawyer. She was a general counsel of an agency, and she shared with me her vision and exposed me or shared with me what the role would take. And it was just, it didn't even capture nearly what I'm doing now and the ability to really be part of policy, not only for the state, but at a national level. So it's a decision that I'm very fortunate and very grateful for. And again, led to this opportunity today, so thank you.
So one thing that Aaron Otian said is that's kind of how I ended up here. And Gerardo, kind of the same thing with your story, and this is what I think is important for us to acknowledge. Last year, we ran a survey of ETS attendees, and we asked them, how did you get into energy? And we found that 64% said that they felt like they fell into energy. They didn't proactively pursue a career in energy, and so far, these two people next to me are kind of telling me the same thing. I relate to that story very much as well. I was studying accounting in my undergrad at St. Edward's University, which is just a small private Division II college down the road. And I realized halfway through my junior year that I did not want to become an accountant. But I was studying accounting because I really liked problem solving and working with numbers and analyzing those numbers to figure out what they mean for the business, and how you use that information to make decisions. I volunteered at an event that I found online, and it said something along the lines of like sustainability and energy, and come help impact your community. And they were also paying like an hourly rate to volunteer at this event. And I said, sure, that sounds somewhat interesting. I'm interested in my community, I'm interested in sustainability. I showed up, I volunteered a few times, and it ended up being a Z Prime event where I met Jason Rodriguez, the CEO, who offered me a job doing market research around emerging technologies. Now, I didn't have skills in market research, but I had skills in analyzing numbers and understanding what they meant. So Z Prime, under the leadership of Christine Richards, who is formerly our director of research, taught me how to kind of take my skill set that I had learned in undergrad and translate it to energy, and I started to do that, and that's what I've been doing for the past 3 years. So myself as well, I kind of just fell into energy, but once I was here and after working on research about a year in, I realized that this is what I was passionate about, and decided that this is where I'm going to continue to try to grow my career, because it had that balance of problem solving things that were challenging, and also that reward of seeing, you're working with these people that you can impact your community and the way that people live their lives. So I very much fell into energy, but now that I'm here, I'm very happy to be here.
You fell into energy and then you fell for energy.
Oh,
Yes.
love your energy.
Well, mine was much more calculated. Just like anybody wanted to get into the energy industry, I got a degree in advertising, which I'm sure is very common here. Turns out I'm a terrible graphic designer. So I ended up wanting to go back to graduate school, and I kind of had the same ambition as far as like, well, I want to do something that's meaningful, impactful. Degrees in sustainability, at least at Texas State University 10 plus years ago, did not really exist with that name. So I ended up going back and getting a degree in urban and environmental planning, which was just geography and political science based. And so I wanted to have that kind of, that meaningful transition into a career now. And just so happened, the week I graduated from there, I got hired by CPS Energy for a temporary job to work on a new electric vehicle program in San Antonio. I didn't know the first thing about energy when I got hired there. I didn't know how many acronyms were in this business, and you have to learn a million of them to have a decent conversation with anybody. But I was there for less than a year, and I realized, like, in my mind when I started there, I was like, well, I'm supposed to be doing urban planning. I mean, what am I doing in an electric utility? Oh, well, that's the most ingrained urban planning that I could think of. I mean, once I got in that. And so after I was there, I was like, well, okay, I started learning a little bit more about the actual industry, and I realized, well, I really like the role of what we're doing with electric transportation. So I ended up getting a job here at Austin Energy 7 years ago, and then kind of trying not to say no to anything. And it's been 7 years, and it feels like about 2 weeks, basically, because there's just so much more to learn. And so I definitely fell into it like everybody else. And I didn't know I'd stay for this long, so far.
I think something that's interesting that all three of you mentioned was wanting to make an impact and be involved in the community. I think that's another defining sort of characteristic of millennials. Same for me. That's one of the reasons I wasn't happy with working at the state. I felt like I was just sort of pushing paper around all day, and so I think that really resonates with me as well.
Can we do a quick poll of the room and everybody raise their hand if you felt like you fell into energy? Raise your hand if you feel like you fell into energy. some people, people who are going like this, you care to explain a little bit, or you don't have to.
Well, I was in grad school at LBJ School of Public Affairs, and I knew I was interested in environmental issues, energy issues, but I ended up doing I was involved in a research project for Austin Energy, and that's how I came to realize, the electric utility business is a really great place to be, to make an impact. And that's really where policy is happening, where it's really being implemented and having a huge impact. So it's kind of a mix.
Tree, I saw.
Oh, yeah, I kind of fell into, I didn't start in energy, I started in software. I fell into software. But because we sell into many industries.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't tell, but I think I would say at least about half the room said they fell into energy.
So when you say energy, are you referring to electricity or gas?
Like auras.
Yeah, the sort of all of it. Like much like ETS, there's a lot of it means electricity, but it doesn't always. The utility space in general, I think, is.
And for me, it's utility work. So the Commerce Commission regulates water, gas, and electric, and actually we also do some telecommunications and transportation. So for me, it's just whatever, that full gamut, not just energy.
But I think there's a lot of millennials coming into the energy space fresh, and I think one thing that's been really helpful for all of us, not to speak for you guys, but one thing that's been helpful for a lot of us is learning from others that have been in this industry a lot longer than we have. I don't think that's a controversial statement. So we've had people mentoring us, people helping us get along, especially since, as we just established, not as many people as you think actually come into this with backgrounds in energy, in education, or in actual practice. So, for example, Aaron mentioned our old boss, Christine Richards. She definitely acted as a mentor to a lot of us on the content team, and she would often give us activities that weren't sponsored content, just to get us to learn things about energy. She would often have us do weekly meetings where we'd have to research a topic and come prepared to talk about it. And that was just a way to help jumpstart us into learning the litany of acronyms Cameron was talking about. And also you can also be mentored by other millennials. Erin Otain here has been my boss for the past year, and she's been instrumental in helping me figure out how to talk to other people in energy who maybe know more than I do, but she's great at communications, and I am not. So I've been really appreciative of that. You're welcome. Why don't we tell a little story about our mentors as well, and other people we've interacted with that have helped us along our energy journey?
I've had several mentors since starting in this industry. I'd say in my world right now, for a lot of what I do, it's a mile wide and an inch deep. And so my chain of command at Austin Energy has been very helpful for helping me navigate through those things, very supportive of that. I'd even say I have a couple mentors in this room that understand different levels that are way deeper than I'll ever understand on different policy areas, or from an engineering aspect. It's one thing I've never had trouble getting is deeper dive information into specific areas here. So when I started at CPS, my team there knew I knew absolutely nothing about energy, and they knew I knew absolutely nothing about how the industry worked or anything. So they very thoughtfully guided me through, okay, you're working in a group called I think it was called Energy Research and Technology Initiatives. So basically, new stuff. You're working in a group called New Stuff. And if you're going to be doing that, you need to learn what old stuff you're affecting, or at least learn how you're making that transition. And so that was one thing that it continues to be. I rely on other people to help me guide me through that process. Is if you're going to disrupt something, you need to know what that is you are disrupting, and if you want to implement new technology, you need to learn more about what that's either replacing or aiding. It's not a simple transition, and so I'm always leaning towards folks internally to help guide me through that process and get me more aware of deeper dive?
Yeah, I would say so. Coming into the industry, doing market research, especially in a time where the industry is undergoing such a significant transformation. I know the industry for what is happening now. I don't know the industry for what it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. At least that's not my experience. So exactly like Cameron was saying, I had to, while learning market research skills, also take time out of my day to learn about how we got to where we are. And my mentor, Christine, was very adamant about continuing to learn, how did we get here? What are some of the legacy systems we're dealing with? What are we trying to replace? I think a lot of the times we can come in with these very headstrong ideas on this is what we need to do in order to change, and this is what needs to be done. But we don't really take into account, when I say we, I think younger generations don't really take into account what was built up until now and why it was done that way and why it's there and what purpose it's serving. So one of the things that my mentor really helped me with was continuing to learn about the industry previously and how that affects what is happening now. One of the biggest challenges, I think, especially when it comes to having skill sets, is millennials can get deterred from getting into the industry because they're like, I'm not an engineer, I don't have a science background. We actually, in the same survey I just mentioned, last year we had 70% of people who attended ETS say that they had degrees in areas other than power engineering, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, civil engineering, in computer sciences or related to that. So 70% of ETS attendees last year that also said they fell into energy did not have backgrounds in engineering and sciences. They had backgrounds in things like business and economics and architecture and geography. So how do we start to think about how these different skill sets can help us during this transformation, but making people mindful of how we got here? And that's kind of what I think one of the biggest impacts my mentor had on me was saying, okay, this is how we got here, this is what we know you're passionate about, maybe be thinking about these things as we try to innovate around some of these challenges.
And I think, just to kind of go a few things that were shared, I think one of the purposes of what we brainstormed for this workshop was there's a need for more awareness of opportunity for millennials, right? And almost categorize these job opportunities in a way that they understand and receive the messaging. And there's a huge need to, maintain institutional memory, right? Because I mean, if you have a generation that's completely retiring and is going to lead a workforce, where does all that institutional memory that happened? And you do need that in order to evolve and make sure you don't make the same mistakes and then you improve on and really have great opportunity. As far as mentors, from my experience, has been a little bit unique in this industry with respect to, first, I advise a commissioner, right? I advise a commissioner who was appointed by a governor who similarly had no background in utility work. She was working for regulating professional certificates. So she came on board and then within 4 months hired me, and I have had the benefit of kind of navigating this world with her. And it's not just navigating cases that they go before the commission that they have to vote on, which is rate cases, tariffs, and anything from certifications for retail electric suppliers, and that understanding the complexities involved in that. But it's also their speaking engagements. They also look for treatises to be part of the industry. So I had to take my skill set, which was traditional law practice, and apply it in this space. But again, I had the foundation of the skills to be able to do that. And I felt that in fact I was advantaged in this space to be able to have that training that I did receive in law school. So I had the opportunity again to write articles with the commissioner, to help her draft and make presentations. In fact, she's speaking tomorrow, so she had to speak on the regulatory reform that's happening in Illinois that incentivizes technology and innovation. So not only did I have to go and, luckily within this last 2 years, I've had to be able to build my expertise, but I had to rely also on our subject matter experts at the commission who I'm indebted to life for, because there's no way I could be able to do this, especially with the county, because I'm not a numbers guy, which is why I went to law school, right? But in that regard, she's served, and I say this too, because there's been distinctions I think in the industry, or just all industries when it comes to mentoring, as the type of mentoring that's done. She's been truly a supporter and a promoter. and support her in the sense that she really has availed me the opportunity to seek additional education, to be with her in these opportunities that she receives and she shares with me, but also similarly promote me and promote my skill set in the industry and have my presence known and visible to others. The agency has been terrific. Our chairman and our executive director are truly committed to training and supporting the next generation that's coming into this industry. And then lastly, I've been fortunate to have truly great leaders in this space who are really availing me to opportunities and providing key insight and advice and guiding me through the process so that because I've made a decision, I'm completely committed to this space and I'm looking forward to growing my career.
I would echo what Aaron Hardick said about Christine at Z Prime, but so I guess I'll take a little bit of a different angle. Before coming to Z Prime, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, so I got involved in a couple different organizations that I volunteered for, and met some people who really helped me figure things out along the way. So I think, having mentors in the industry is obviously very important, but going outside of the industry and talking to other people in general who've been successful, who you admire, having other people you can sort of bounce ideas off and get advice from.
Absolutely.
So, question. Pretty much all of you mentioned how you had to talk with others and learn about the path that was before you, the way things were done before getting into the space. But I think, Aaron, you mentioned something I thought was really interesting, and I wanted to know your take on this. Had you not had that conversation with those folks who said, here's how we used to do it, and you or your colleagues there had charged in with all of the great ideas and energy and all that you wanted to do to change the energy space, how would things have been different? How do you think it would have been different had you not had that mentoring or that coaching, early into your entrance into the energy space?
Well, I mean, had we gone that route, I don't know if we would be able to effectively problem solve. I don't think that you can really move forward with solutions if you don't really know what you're trying to fix. And from what I can tell in energy right now, there is a lot of kind of debates around, what is the right problem to solve and how do you solve it? So talking to those subject matter experts and saying, what do you think about this? What are the challenges you're seeing regarding this? I know that you were maybe doing this way, but given the way that technology is now influencing your organization over the past 7 to 5 years, how has that started to change your job? How have you seen your role change? And so I think that was really insightful in helping us understand maybe what's coming next, because understanding those previous challenges kind of help us understand trends and the way that trends affect things and kind of the life cycle of those trends. So that's why built into our research process, before we publish anything, I have to call 5 to 7 subject matter experts that have been in the space for 5 to 10 to 15 years before we can even move forward with a paper that talks about new technology and new trends influencing the industry. So that's actually something that we continue to do and build into our research process for that purpose, to make sure we have a really good understanding of the challenges at hand and then the different perspectives of those challenges.
I'll kind of piggyback on that as well if I can, just to share that I think that generally, previous generations tend to be more conservative, right? And I think when you, especially with technology, like, wow, this is amazing, it's exciting, let's implement it, let's just deploy it, right? But that's not strategic and it's not necessarily wise, right? And I think that conservative approach and thinking as far as how you strategize is important, right? And the commission will touch on this tomorrow, but I think a way that you can achieve a win-win has been, I think, through pilots, right? You can kind of study, integrate technology at a much smaller scale to see its effect and see how it operates with our power systems and our ancillary other services, right? To truly be able to tell in the event that this is a right fit, not just for your state, but just, neighboring states and just nationally, right? Because look at far as AMI, right? I think a lot of people are so apprehensive of AMI. Look what happened with AMR, right? And how that technology developed. So you have to scale, I think, the integration of technology. While it could be exciting, you want to completely deploy it, but you also need the institutional memory to understand the way about going to do things. I think I will end by saying that I think we're in a very unique space right now, because I've had the pleasure where I'm learning from veterans who have been in the industry for multiple decades. And I respect that, and I value it, because again, I can't do my job without it. But it's also unique that I'm also learning with them. So it's that dynamic too that's happening in this space, where you're learning with veterans at the same time, and you're almost at the same level playing field with respect to the exposure, but you have the benefit of that institutional knowledge.
Thank you very much for that question. I just emphasize this is a sort of an open dialogue, so if at any time you have any questions for our panelists or just something to add to the discussion, you're more than welcome to pipe in.
So this, I think this mentoring word is interesting, because you have to ask who's mentoring who. Is it really even mentoring? Because when you take this, the way we think about generations, right? The typical organization is structured like a pyramid, right? And you work your way up the pyramid. So it's more likely that you'll have your baby boomers and Gen X at the top of the pyramid. You'll have the millennials and the Gen Zs at the bottom of the pyramid. And things are changing so rapidly. Everyone talks about agility, but they seem to be struggling. Like, what does that mean? So, as much as the people at the top of the pyramid can teach the people at the bottom of the pyramid, I would say it's equally important now that, because once you get to the top of the pyramid, your mindset is kind of fixed. You're not that open to new ideas. You're more invested in the status quo. And you see that in more, let's say, progressive organizations where they're really, and the pyramid is also flattening. The other interesting thing is that when you look at the two ends of the spectrum, the typical baby boomers, they had way more respect for authority. And the Gen Zs don't really care much for, well, they have a different attitude towards authority. I think you can call it an attitude to authority. So it goes back to this issue of organizational structure and how do you actually facilitate good conversations, collaboration, trying new things. I think that's where organizations seem to struggle. Because again, it's like, I look at I'm not a millennial, but my kids influence me a lot.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What I think that is really interesting about what you said is that there is a lot of opportunity as things, this pyramid starts to flatten a little bit for people that have just graduated college or have just gotten through their graduate school, to sort of talk to folks that are more seasoned and mentor about things that they are strong in, which might be sort of blind spots for folks that have been around a bit longer. I mean, from my personal experience, I'm pretty fresh out of college and working at an organization here in Austin that focuses on energy, but there are people there that have been there for years and they're brilliant, but there are certain things just that they need to get up on the curve with too, and I find that I'm helping them almost as much as they're helping me, so it's kind of interesting to see that.
What's your name, ma'am?
Marielle.
So I think, Marielle, you and Shri both bring in a great point, which is that the process of bringing in the millennials into the workplace. You're right. When you use the word mentoring, it's not just someone from the old generation teaching a class on to the next generation and then being done with it. It's more than just training. It is helping to develop them into the next era of energy professionals. The title of the thing. And likewise, it is a two-way street. There's a lot that we also have to teach to impart those those big ideas that I guess we're known for, and change the industry from within. So you're right, it isn't a two-way street. I think when we're talking about mentoring, we're talking about the people that were instrumental in helping develop us into the energy professionals we are today. And I guess that is a two-way street. I mean, you actually gave me a lot to think about. But I really like what you said, Gerardo, in that regard as well, with your mentor, with your relationship with the commissioner, and how she's helping you to become a better professional, and you're helping her to be able to do her job more effectively.
And that's a unique dynamic, and I will say that's not the same case for everybody, or not just being a commissioner, but just in the industry. Again, we had the opportunity to go to forums across the country, and again, I think it's an opportunity for everyone to kind of help each other, and again, millennials are going to be the next set of leaders, so you need to build that leadership, and if you're not taking an active interest in doing that, it's going to be very difficult, especially in this space where there's so much change, and there needs to be a respect for what has been built before.
So getting into that change, and we're going to do another little activity here. This one doesn't have Post-it notes, so don't worry. Everyone's table should have a notepad and a series of pens. If you need more pens, just ask. What we're gonna be doing here is on this page. Just we need you to divide it into 3 columns if you can, and per table. If you're not at a table, there's empty chairs at the tables. Find yourself one. Per table, we want you to work out over the course of maybe 6 minutes. One column should be the top 3 reasons for wanting to hire millennials in your organization, like skill sets or culture, that sort of thing. One should be the top 3 issues you believe millennials are passionate about. And the third column should be the top 3 challenges in recruiting or reaching millennial or Gen Z professionals. In fact, does anyone need me to repeat that?
Yes.
Okay, I'll repeat that one more time. So one column should be the top 3 reasons for wanting to hire millennials into your organization. One should be the top 3 issues you believe millennials are passionate about, and the top 3 challenges in recruiting or reaching millennial professionals. And again, there are no correct answers, or rather, there are no wrong answers, incorrect answers. There are no correct answers. It's a trick question. There are no incorrect answers. And we're just interested to see, where everyone thinks these professionals are, where they, and how we can reach them. Each table comes up with one sheet. We don't need one from everyone. Each table.
I'll scribe.
Each table. Okay, so we just had this activity. Instead of having you bring them up, we'll start talking about it topic by topic. So just going around, we'll start with the issues you think millennials are passionate about. Someone from this table, why don't you read your answers off of that?
We said environment and climate change, pay equity, and
fair enough. That table back there.
Well,
We got onto that.
we just got done with the why hire.
Sorry,
It was a very animated discussion.
like I said, there is a lot to unpack. There is a lot to unpack there. Did you guys get to any of them?
Yeah, we had. So one of the things that then replenishing the herd talked about being kind of the utility industry has a lot of boomers, and then it seems millennials and not, the middle is somewhat empty, but then fresh thoughts and ideas, and then also access to digitalization, which I think we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and that's actually pretty consistent with ours, which we had kind of intellectual curiosity, idea around new ways of thinking, and then kind of tech literacy and digitalization.
What did this table come up with?
So we actually didn't get to that question either.
That's fine. So at the very least, I'm pretty sure we all got to the first question. What were your reasons for hiring?
We had their passion, they wanted to be innovative, and yeah.
And what do you guys come up with for reasons of hiring?
Sort of the purpose, environment, and sustainability interest, the meaningful work, and
And this back table?
We had ideas, reasons to hire, the ideas that they bring, the energy that they bring to the organization.
And this table?
We had flexibility, adaptability, and tech savvy.
So,
Could I also throw out something here?
yeah.
So I have.
Sorry, we'll have the shot.
I'd like to comment that one of the things that we weren't particularly clear what a millennial was. What we were talking about was new hires from undergraduate school, rather than 40-year-olds who fit into that category.
I think that's fair. I think that's a very fair way of going about it. Like as we've established here, there's no right way. There's no right way to define a generation. There are general guidelines and general levels of maybe parts of your life where certain technologies were introduced. So I think if what you're looking at is undergrads or people fresh out of college, I think that's as good a metric as any. So we'll get to the. Sorry, Sri, you had something to say.
I was actually related to what he was saying. I have difficulty putting my finger on what is a millennial and the specific attributes, because while we have these categories, you grow up, you go to school, you get an education, you get a job, you get fired, you get married, you have a child, or you go through life. 50 to 60% of all of these groups will be shaped by those things. So then, what is the one or two or three things that kind of point to, hey, because I was born in this time period, I have a certain perspective. I can't put my finger on it. That's what I struggle with.
And I think that's sort of what having the aggregate of these answers is not necessarily providing a clear answer, but it is getting us the right direction. I think there were a lot of themes around passion, around tech savviness, and around new ideas. And I think part of that is due to the fact that as we come into a new digital age in the utility space, there are new problems that people who grew up in a world of technology are really well equipped to handle. I think that's sort of where the confluence of all of your answers sort of come together. I'm curious what the panel thinks.
I was generally saying, I would not use the year you're born as a replacement for a resume. There's a lot of people I grew up with or went to school with that I would not say share the same ideologies or skill sets or decision-making ability as myself. So I definitely don't think it's just interchangeable, and there's a lot of things that shape how your life pans out. So.
Well, I was going to share that. I think that's why these conversations are important, right? I mean, that those are certain attributes by a generation or even a gray area that need to be carried on, right? You mentioned some, an attitude towards authority, right? And that's an attribute of the boomer generation where there's great respect for authority, and that line seems to be kind of blurring as the generations come on. So I think that's why it's imperative to have these mentorships, these relationships among the generations, because that is foundational and it's important, regardless of what other generation, what's happened in innovation. Respect for authority and just almost like an institutional framework in that tradition is important. So I think that builds a conversation. And then to the point regarding, students who are coming out of college, again, that's also, for me, raises the need of, something that we're not necessarily talking about today, but is being talked about in the industry and needs to be talked more, is STEM, right? The STEM education and STEM awareness by the youth. I mean, there's not enough being done in that aspect, and especially this is an area that is exciting for us, but there's very little of us here. And there's a lot of opportunity coming in and necessary job vacancies that need to be filled by people who are trained and skilled for them. And without that training, they will be in trouble.
To speak towards that, I'm a mechanical engineer by discipline, but I trade for the last 20 years. I've been working across a variety of energy sectors. And what I've done, like when I came down from Kansas City a few years ago to Texas, we used to do the Kansas City STEM Alliance. You know, when as being a part of the American Society of Mechanical Engineering, we identified 25 years ago that this was coming. We knew it was coming. This is happening now. And we tried to go out and, like, I know for 2 years, we had $70,000 sitting in the bank account that no one wanted to pick up, to go pick up the calculus book, pick up the physics, go do the hard stuff. And the thing is that what we found, and this is me being a little crunchy about stuff, because I played college football to pay for my school, so I would love something grand. But the thing is that there's just a decision. It's like, well, it's too hard. I don't want to do it. Somebody else started pass the buck, pass the buck, pass the buck. Well, what happens when you get to the table and there's someone else that passes it? And I think that's when we start talking sustainability. We'll get into that. Because once the knowledge vacuum happens and it snaps shut, and where are you? Because there's going to be a point where you have to start figuring out, well, who's going to do the work, when's going to happen. And if there's only 5 of us in the room that can do it, and we need 500 people to do it, you're going to have to wait. That's going to cause a big stress. And so what I do is I go out on my travels to my job. I go and talk to, you have to go into the schools, you have to talk to the superintendent first before you talk to science teachers. And we were having to go as far back now as to elementary school, because we had tests to assess for, like, who your gifted and talented truly are. Give them first, commons first robotics, give them some other chemistry sets, do whatever, to start getting their minds wrapped around. This isn't hard, it's just you gotta put the time in. Right. And we're starting to see that, but it's gonna be 15, 20 years from now.
No, certainly early education is critical, and I think that there lies the opportunity now. So, right, so you still have a generation that's currently present with us. So there lies the opportunity to allow those generations to figure out how to message to the various generations. I mean, listen, we all have, the way we use technology and the way it's impacted our lives has happened across the board, regardless of what generation we're part of. But now is the opportunity to kind of invite those, the newest generations to understand how to communicate that need in a way that they receive it, right? Because we're, I mean, not to make light or make fun of generations, but we're in a society right now where it's like the attraction is how can I become famous, right? And there's this need of like celebrity, right? But so there's that focus like, oh, I want to be a tradesman, or I want to be an engineer, or so we have to again come back and kind of think of those principles, right, of the boomer generation, how that could be communicated to earlier generations in the way that they receive it through social media. Even through consumer engagement, which we highlighted. I mean, people are not educated by a leaflet anymore in their utility bill. I mean, come on, right? That's not happening. So you have to go think outside the box, and you have to think outside the box on how do you communicate with people. And I think people have to kind of, push themselves and again have those conversations, not resort to what's easy as well. So.
Yeah. Did anyone have? Did anyone get to the column with barriers to entry or problems? Can you say what you wrote?
Sorry. The challenges were jobs that require 5 years of experience. Or any experience. And that top talent is already hired.
But what do you do when you're not top talent? You have to start somewhere and build up to it.
Yeah.
So it's like the expectation you come in, like I want to be up here, but when your skill set only puts you here, there's a big ego blast. And I've sat through a lot of interviews, guys say, well, I want to be doing this and this. I'm like, well, great. You can compress 25 years into 30 minutes, rock and roll, I'm there. That's not how it works. And sometimes I think there's a lot of angst that comes about when you're being say, I want to do this now and I want it yesterday. The immediacy doesn't happen, especially the traditional roles in like the power, utility, things like that. It takes time to build up. How do we get there? Learn the traditions, understand how the science works. And it's just not there. And I think sometimes you have to say, just pump the brakes, take a deep breath. We're going to get there. I'm going to be your friend. Getting back to what we were talking about the mentorship deals, I look at it more like a dialogue of responsibility. It's like you talk back and forth, it's like, you're gonna learn from me, I'm gonna learn from you, let's get this together. And I said, this is what happens when the world doesn't have water, electricity, and all that. No one wants to live in The Walking Dead. This is where we can go. And go where do these things, try to give them like the worst case scenarios so you see both sides of the spectrum. And they also calm down and start getting more calm. Say, okay, yeah, you see me, I'm valued, I see you, I value you, and now let's move forward. So that's all I've seen that happen.
I think there needs to be more of that, right? Yeah. Like that trajectory. Because, and listen, also, there's a factor that, for instance, like for me, I didn't come into this industry from college. Mm-hmm. So I I was already working as a lawyer. So here, I am not going to have that foundation of a decade of insight that someone else would have if they would have come out of law school or undergraduate, right?
Let me ask you a question though. Would you be willing, being a lawyer, to come into like a STEM degree? You can always go get a master's degree and say electrical engineering can step up to it.
I have thought about it.
That's the thing, is like, I don't want to push for the dark side here.
Right.
Come on over.
No, that's-
Come see us, man. We'll put you in the room.
Yes, no. I mean, it's something I thought about because I think it is necessary. There's huge value in that because I've interacted with, with professionals, with the engineers, and I think again that's a great marriage of skill set for the space.
So
I thought about it.
one thing that I do think is important for us to touch on, we're actually getting close to time, but when we think about having these requiring certain 5 years of experience to do this job, one thing that we're seeing in the digital transition is we're having to redefine what the future workforce looks like and what are those jobs. So some of the jobs today aren't going to be the jobs 5 to 10 years from now. So how do you start to bring in younger people today to start to teach them and provide them with that baseline knowledge so that 5 years from now they're in your organization and you have that human capital resource available to take on that new role that maybe hasn't existed yet. So how do you start to think about the future workforce and communicating to younger people or people from outside industry saying, this is maybe not what you're going to be doing right now, but this is what we are doing to achieve this future digital entity, to achieve what this role could be in a few years. And that is, from what I can tell from the research that we've done, is that's lacking. What does the future workforce look like, and how do we communicate to people today so that they're interested in helping be a part and being a part of that later on down the line?
You gotta be able to do less with more, or do more with less. You have to figure that you have to embrace the fact there's going to be less people with the knowledge and the knowledge bank is created. Until we get over that hump, we get more people in there to actually do this. You have to be prepared to do that, be prepared for automation, and less humanization, but to get more throughput to maintain what society needs. There's going to be a lot of long hours and high stress levels. So the work-life balance is probably going to be a little bit on the suck side, but we'll get there.
So my company, it's not necessarily the only way, but one of the ways in which that my company has tackled that challenge has been through a rotational program, and I'm starting to see that more and more, even just outside of the energy industry, whereby you have these like classes or graduating classes type of thing, and then they just rotate throughout the different aspects of a company, and then at the end of that rotational program decide between that individual and the company the best fit for them based on interest, based on need. Yes, so it's definitely a way to tackle that type of challenge. It certainly has its own challenges within it as well, but I think that's certainly an opportunity to see from these specific individuals where else can we improve in the company because they have that unique experience. So it's a give and take as well.
We have that exact situation at Exhibit A right there in the blue shirt. It's part of that rotation program, and it's amazing. Like to me, the amazing thing is like this didn't exist for forever. I mean, like that's what I kind of think of now, and because I know people that work there or worked at utilities for 20-something years that whether they worked in a specific area, let's just say billing. Well, they might have no idea how any sort of metering infrastructure works or anything like there's been zero visibility across the board. So what you might pick up in 6 months might be more than what someone has picked up in 20 years, just not having that visibility to other organizations. So, and then when we talked about earlier is like when you change something, what are you affecting? You now have a little bit better idea of what it is, and you can point out, okay, I think you have a great idea, and now you can actually start to tweak it and like make sure it's actually like the best idea.
Yeah. It's quite amazing though that there's some stuff going on around the world that is heartwarming. I was out in India a few months ago, and there's a large-scale service provider for the energy industry, and they have an energy academy for the people that work in the organisation, for their kids to go to. And this isn't as it's not instead of going to school; it's as well as. And the parents have them going to this energy academy after school. And they're drinking up this knowledge. And these kids are young kids. And that's where you start to say, oh boy, there are people out there who are thinking about this and really starting to prepare that next generation. And that, for me, is fantastic and heartwarming.
one of the things that we've been kind of dancing around but haven't outright said it, or it's been outright said but we haven't focused on it yet, is the idea of how do we make sure that the next generation knows where the opportunities are, because they are there. And like someone, I believe it was you, Gerardo, said something to the effect of people are going in like, well, I'm not an engineer. How do I get energy? And it is things like, well, I wanted to get into software and found there were opportunities in energy. I wanted to get into urban planning and found that there were opportunities in energy. So one thing that we can definitely be working on as an industry is figuring out how to get those people who aren't necessarily engineers, no offense, sir,
We have room on the dark side.
to find a space where they can develop those skills to drive change in some one way or another. And I think education early on plays a big part in that. And I think there are also organizational challenges in that. I'll pass it off to panel. Aaron, what do you think about the making those opportunities more available?
Yeah, I mean, I think. No, Austin Energy actually has.
Yeah, so
a great
we have to
program,
mention this.
yeah.
Austin Energy, and you may know more about it, but Austin Energy has an EV for Schools project that they have started this past year, where they are going and installing charging infrastructure at elementary, middle schools, and high schools. I think in 5 locations throughout the Austin area. But they're all
Yeah, it was in 4 high schools around town.
and it's in. Also, with providing them the charging infrastructure, they are providing them with a curriculum around sustainability and electrification of transportation. So they're not taking the siloed approach of, okay, education is separate from some of the other things we're doing in the community. They're giving them the fleet vehicle, the charging station, and the curriculum to say, here's how you can teach your kids about what is going on outside in the parking lot. So yeah, I think that's one of those good examples of how you start to tie education in with other types of projects and pilots that you're doing.
What is it called?
It's EVs for Schools.
A lot of companies have actually been doing that. Like we were doing this for about 10, 15 years ago. That's where we actually do outreach to like the science and technology teachers, math teachers, give them sabbatical work during the summer to come to one of the corporations and give them some side money and stuff like that. You know, teachers could always get paid more. And then have them get real world experience when back to the classroom and give them some equipment. And then if they have a trade school, drop off like, you know, a whole tech lab or whatever that you want to put in there. But the thing is it's mostly, you know, that exposure, the sort of knowledge you get is going to be of great value. And I know for us, working the corporate side of stuff in the private sector, your corporations can, if your company isn't doing this, you can get federal credits for it actually dropping that stuff off. Or like, we do like 501c like matching for my company. If I donate $5,000 of my own money to some school, my company will match that. And there's ways to actually invest in the next generation, you know, pay it forward, and it makes a big difference. But sometimes people forget about that because they get very, you know, tunnel vision, and they think that I have enough stuff taking kids to like, you know, basketball practice, scouts or whatever. There's just not enough time. But you can put it right there at the school. It's already there. It's easy enough. So.
Well, we're just about out of time. Does anyone have any lingering questions for the group? Then I guess I can release y'all a minute early. Thank you very much for attending this panel. I feel like we got a lot accomplished.
Thank you.
Thank you.